Around the 6th century BC, the center of Indian civilization shifted eastward into Bihar and the Ganges basin. The tough, hard soil of this region had resisted earlier farmers, but that changed the moment they began forging axes and plowshares out of iron. With stronger tools, early Indians cleared the dense, sprawling forest cover and deeply plowed the earth. This generated a massive surplus of food, which supported a rapid demographic boom and allowed nomadic people to settle into permanent, prosperous villages. This map shows how early settlements absorbed surrounding territories, consolidating into 16 competitive states known as the Mahajanapadas. This wealth triggered urbanization. 60 major cities, including Varanasi and Vaishali, emerged, linked by vast trade routes spanning the subcontinent. The days of small, relatively egalitarian tribal communities were over. The sudden explosion of urban trade centers introduced a complex, highly stratified society where material wealth dictated a person's status. Moving massive quantities of textiles, silk, and pottery across long distances required a reliable system of exchange. Bartering was no longer sufficient to sustain the booming economy, leading merchants to invent physical currency. These irregular silver fragments, stamped with symbols like crescents and fish, are punch-marked coins. They represent the earliest standardized money used by Indian merchants to facilitate their expanding trade networks. But this flood of new capital brought deep social fractures. As cities grew richer, violence, theft, and cruelty sharply increased. The traditional Varna system hardened, locking individuals into rigid social positions, while a new class of merchants accumulated vast fortunes. Despite their economic power, wealthy trading classes were denied equal social standing by the dominant Brahmanical class, whose authority relied on complex, expensive rituals. The mercantile groups wanted a system that validated their status without demanding constant sacrifices. The physical cities were thriving, but the rapid economic expansion left a moral vacuum. People were exhausted by the sudden surge in inequality and conflict, creating a widespread hunger for a philosophy centered on peace. In response to this violent, stratified society, a man named Vardhaman Mahavira offered a radical alternative. He founded Jainism, a faith completely rejecting material wealth. It argued that true liberation came only through extreme nonviolence, strict vows, and the total purification of the soul. Around the same time, Gautama Buddha abandoned his royal status to find his own answers to the era's suffering. After experimenting with extreme deprivation, he proposed the middle path, a philosophy avoiding both worldly indulgence and severe punishing asceticism. This diagram illustrates the core logic of his teachings, known as the Four Noble Truths. The Buddha observed that human life is inherently filled with suffering, and he traced the root cause of all that misery directly to human desire. To break this endless cycle, he outlined the Eightfold Path. Rather than performing expensive rituals, a person could literally sever their desires through practical steps like right speech, right action, and right living. The Buddha arrived at these exact realizations under a tree at Bodh Gaya, a site now marked by the towering stone spire of the Mahabodhi temple, where he ultimately achieved enlightenment. These teachings spread rapidly because they required no wealth and no priests. By measuring a person's worth entirely through their personal conduct and charity, rather than their birth, Jainism and Buddhism offered true social equality to the masses. While wandering monks preached nonviolence, the rulers of the Mahajanapadas were waging constant brutal wars to absorb their neighbors and control the continent's booming trade. This map shows why Magadha quickly outpaced its rivals. Its capital was naturally fortified by 5 hills. Surrounding forests provided timber and elephants, while exclusive access to massive iron deposits gave them the sharpest weapons. Armed with superior iron and fueled by vast agricultural surplus, Magadha methodically swallowed the competing states. Under the rule of Chandragupta Maurya, this aggressive expansion formed the Mauryan Empire, seizing control of nearly the entire Indian subcontinent. Governing such a sprawling territory required a deeply complex machine. From the capital at Pataliputra, the Mauryan administration operated a massive standing army, collected rigid taxes, and maintained an extensive spy network to monitor its own citizens. The 6th century BC had produced 2 entirely opposing forces. While the ascetic monks sought absolute inner peace, The Magadha state engineered the ultimate machinery for total war. These two forces ultimately collided under Emperor Ashoka. He pushed his empire into Kalinga to secure absolute dominance, but the conquest resulted in horrific slaughter and the complete devastation of the region. Surveying the sheer scale of the death he had caused, Ashoka experienced profound psychological remorse. In an incredibly rare historical pivot, the most powerful conqueror in the world immediately abandoned all military expansion. He adopted Buddhist principles of nonviolence and synthesized them into a new state policy called Dhamma. He replaced the brutal expansion of borders with the active promotion of tolerance, charity, and welfare for his subjects. To ensure this doctrine outlived him, Ashoka carved his edicts into massive stone pillars across the empire. The Sarnath capital, with its 4 lions and the wheel of law, physically stamped the philosophy of peace directly into the Indian landscape. The wandering monks had developed the moral framework, but Ashoka possessed the sheer imperial power. By integrating ascetic values into his vast administrative machine, he institutionalized peace on a continental scale. This era of enforced peace allowed the Mauryan economy and culture to reach a creative peak. Monolithic pillars cut from single pieces of sandstone were raised alongside sprawling brick monuments, marking the earliest examples of monumental Indian art. Artisans also perfected rock-cut architecture. They carved complex structures directly into the sides of mountains, like the Lomas Rishi cave, adorning the heavy granite entryways with highly polished, intricate friezes. But the Mauryan political structure proved brittle. Within 50 years of Ashoka's death, weak successors and mounting economic pressures fractured the administration. The centralized machinery collapsed, and the vast imperial borders dissolved. The sprawling capital cities and fortified trade hubs that dominated the continent eventually crumbled, leaving behind only the ruined stone foundations of the wealth they once aggressively fought to protect. The political boundaries of the ancient world inevitably returned to the earth, but the intellectual revolution did not. Long after Magadha's physical empire turned to dust, the radical ideas of nonviolence, social equality, and spiritual liberation remained the enduring bedrock of human civilization.